Manchester United feel they can complete a structured deal for Hugo Ekitike as the striker news continues. United reportedly keen on a move for Eze for £50 million. We get linked with Dusan Vlahovic. Evann Guessand from Nice is another name added to the list. United are reaching out to Napoli to understand their position on Alejandro Garnacho. Updates on Todibo, Shaw's long-term future, and an insight into Ruben Amorim's coaching from Carrington. All this plus more in today's video as we run through all the latest Manchester United news and transfer news that will keep you right up to date with everything. Welcome to Man United Review. My name's Jamie. Before we get into it, smash a like on the video. Let's jump straight into it. So, I need like a jingle or something for the daily striker news with Manchester United, because that's what it feels like at the moment every day. Talk about the striker position, but obviously it is a key position for us. We know it's one that we're definitely looking to strengthen in the summer. And from Romano, from the report yesterday, saying, look, there's 4 or 5 names on the list. We are going to get linked with a lot of strikers between now and the end, and until we kind of can determine for definite what sort of striker we're going for. Some of that will depend on Champions League football, though, which, you know, until we either win the Europa League or get knocked out the Europa League, I think it's just going to continue that way. So let's go through all the latest. So Manchester United believe Hugo Ekitike is a deal they can complete with a structured financial package. Officials are confident they can reduce the €80 million fee set by Frankfurt, with the player keen on a move. He is one of 3 strikers the club has narrowed their summer strategy to. Now, that came from Sean Conley, who I think is fairly decent with the United news. I think he's got, behind the scenes kind of info around it as well. So that's interesting. What I believe, the reading between the lines, if you think about the Osimhen story, Osimhen's got a release clause, so you have to pay that £63 million release clause, whereas Ekitike, there's an asking price, but you could still meet their asking price, but over a structured deal, a little bit like we did with Joshua Zirkzee, where we paid a little bit more for Joshua Zirkzee, even though he had a release clause, so that we could spread the cost of that deal out over like a 2-3, over, I think it's over a 3-year period, rather than having to pay the lump sum up front. Now, that obviously helps us with PSR perspective, because it might go down as like a £10 million or £20 million deal rather than a £60 million deal like the Osimhen one would. So that's an interesting one to keep an eye on. I've done like a bit of a list which we'll go through in a second around, the kind of strikers that I think we're more heavily linked with, which we'll kind of update. But Ekitike, I would definitely put on the kind of list. Would obviously be an expensive list though as well, whether that would depend on Champions League football or potentially player sales, i.e. Garnacho seems to be one that's linked to a lot with a potential exit as well. But if they can structure that deal differently to maybe the Osimhen one, then maybe that does make that a little bit more plausible, even though it's still an expensive outlay for who I believe is a relatively young striker. But he is a player that apparently United have been interested in for a while. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that in the comments. And I would just hope personally that he's very well scouted. That would be my only kind of concern with bringing in another kind of younger, little bit less experienced striker. But if he's the right profile and he's the one they want to go for, then, it is what it is. We'll have to, get behind it. And I think Ekitike has got, he's a good player, but I just worry personally about the lack of experience in that particular position. But give us your thoughts below. Now, another striker we've been linked to add to the striker list is Vlahovic. So Arsenal, Manchester United and Chelsea are reportedly among the clubs on alert for the potential transfer of Juventus striker Dusan Vlahovic. It looks increasingly like a decision has already been made for Vlahovic to leave Juve this summer, and the Premier League could be his next destination. Vlahovic could also be an important addition to this struggling Man United squad, with Ruben Amorim surely in need of almost anyone to come in to provide an upgrade on the marginally out of form Rasmus Højlund. And that came from the Gazzetta dello Sport, who are actually a decent source. I've caught it in caught offside as well. They're actually fairly decent when it comes to Italian news. Just another kind of striker linked to United. Arsenal apparently going for Gyökeres, by the way. Apparently talks have started with them getting their new sporting director in. Apparently he's making moves already, potentially talking to Nico Williams and Jokovic. That's Yeah, that's a little bit kind of shit, isn't it? From our perspective, when we're looking at like Liam Delap and stuff, but that's where we are at the moment. But Vlahovic is one. Give us your thoughts actually below in the comments. I'd love your opinions on Vlahovic. Vlahovic for me, I think is a good player, but he's never been one that's like I've been super impressed with when I've kind of watched or seen or reviewed. Looks very average statistically in terms of striker, 25 years old. What's the reason why Juventus are wanting to get rid of him? At Fiorentina, he was absolutely outstanding, but his career's, I think, is kind of stalled a little bit at Juve. But then is that, is he a victim of the circumstances at the club as well, but doesn't really particularly stand out in any of his kind of metrics in my opinion. 35 appearances, so 14 goals, 3 assists, which is still, nothing to be sniffed at in Serie A. But for his age, I don't know. I personally, and everyone's different. We all have different tastes and different beliefs. I'm not convinced by Vlahovic. I've got to be honest. Out of all the strikers we're linked with, but he has that experience, and you never know. He could be one of these that if we do get him, maybe he is just a victim of the circumstances at Juve, and he would do better in a different team, in a different system. But we'll have to wait and see. He's on the kind of list anyway, but we'll see what kind of happens. Now, in terms of the striker, the kind of noise or the reports going around seems to be that we've got like a 2-tiered list almost, where we're looking at maybe more expensive strikers if we get European football, or if we generate more income through player sales. And then we're looking at maybe, slightly less expensive strikers if we don't get Champions League football, or we don't manage to get the player sales that were kind of necessary. So I've put like a bit of a list, and these are the ones that are kind of, I would say, more heavily linked with United, because there's been a load of other reports, but not necessarily from the most credible sources. But Osimhen, clear interest, I think, in Osimhen. Like Laurie Whitwell, Romano, all these kind of people keep linking us with Victor Osimhen. Gyökeres, clear links for there, but apparently Arsenal have opened up talks with him as well. And the more recent reports are that he doesn't necessarily see United as his best destination for his career. So I think that one's less likely at the time of recording this video. Sesko's one we've been linked with before, but again, I think the reports on that are just digging up old kind of reports. So there's not that many, credibility or around Sesko. Ekitike I would put up there, and Samu Agihawa again is another one. I've put his fee on there as £86 million because his release clause is €100 million, and there's no other reports I could find around the fee, whether Porto would want the release clause, which in which case I think would price him massively out of the deal, or if you can negotiate a lower fee with the release clause. But they're all around, the 60 to 70 million pound kind of mark for those strikers, and they would be the ones that I would say are more heavily linked with United as the kind of top tiered Champions League or player sale kind of strikers. The other ones are Mateta. The last report was saying that Palace would want £40 million for him, but the reports before that were around 20, I think between 20 and £40 million. Mateta, the one that is probably more realistic is Liam Delap. More stories around Delap. I think he's the kind of, I think him and Osimhen, I would say, are the two most heavily linked strikers. Is those two. Vlahovic, we've just kind of mentioned, but there have been reports about Vlahovic before. Apparently, Juve would want around £38 million for him. And then Jonathan David is one on a free transfer, although he wants, according to reports, about a £14 million signing on fee for Jonathan David. And that's where I think we are with the kind of two list. You've got your more expensive ones, i.e. if we get Champions League football, or if we generate more money through player sales, then potentially that would be, maybe we'll get one of those, or, the cheaper options if we don't get Champions League or we don't get player sales, then potentially I think these are the strikers that are more linked with us at the moment. And obviously that's just going off of the reports. That's not, set in stone. We could easily pull a rabbit out of the hat and sign somebody completely different that nobody's ever heard of, and I hope we do, because obviously that's the way Ineos and Christopher Vivell and teams like that, and the people in place we've got, generally have been operating in the transfer window. But just thought I'd give you a little bit of an update, because there is so much noise going around regarding the striker situation. It's difficult to kind of keep track on. But give us your thoughts on those below. Give us your preferences actually as well. Let us know who you would prefer United to sign on from the kind of list there. Now, another forward we've been linked with is from Nice. So Manchester United and Tottenham are embroiled in a direct battle for the services of OGC Nice star Evann Guessand. United have been keeping a close eye on the player. The club scouts have been impressed by the player's physical strength, his technical skills, and his eye for goal. Now, that came from Ekran Connor, who I have kind of questions about. I'm yet to be convinced by his credibility, but as I keep mentioning, he's got a very large following and gets reported a lot in different kind of media outlets and news outlets and stuff. So that's why I keep bringing you the kind of stories regarding it as well. The only problem with that is I'm pretty sure, because when we tried to sign Todibo in the summer, and there's an update on him I'm going to run through in a bit, the UEFA put a ban on us buying players from Nice, and I'm pretty sure that ban is until September 2025. So until September. So that means if we were going to go for a player from Nice, we can't do it until officially deadline day, which is the 1st of September, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments on this. But doing the Googling and doing some research, I'm pretty sure that that's accurate. So that would be a deadline day deal, and I don't think we'd need to wait till deadline day to get our kind of forward or striker in. I do think we'd want to get players in, hopefully, if we can, early, so they can go on pre-season with Ruben Amorim and understand the system and all of these kind of things. So that throws a little bit of a spanner in the works, if that story is to be believed. But again, I don't necessarily trust the credibility of Ekran Connor, because he's linked us with about 1 billion players in the last few weeks. But in terms of the profile of player, 36 appearances for Nice, 12 goals, 8 assists. Looks a very decent player. Would tick a lot of the boxes, actually, in terms of physicality, speed, aggression, that sort of kind of profile of player. Can play in multiple positions as well. Played off the right, centre forward, left wing, as a second kind of striker as well. Statistically wise versus other midfielders, pretty decent in most metrics, especially like the defensive kind of side of things, so the pressing and that side of things. Up there in goals and, take-ons and all that kind of stuff. So he does actually look fairly impressive compared to other midfielders in the top 5 leagues. And then against other strikers when he's played up there as well. Again, quite good kind of numbers in terms of his stats and data. 81% for assists, 85% for shot creating actions, progressive passes, carries, take-ons, up there with the kind of best around, or the kind of top metrics in the league, and then defensive outlet as well. Do you know what I mean? So if you want somebody that kind of is obviously someone that's good at pressing and good at kind of doing that stuff up front, but then also good progression, good take-ons and stuff, then actually he wouldn't be necessarily a bad shout. It's just, as I mentioned, I don't think we can sign him until September 2025, and the deadline day is the 1st of September 2025. So I'm not sure if that is a reality, which is a shame, because I think they want about 35 to 40 million euros for him as well. That's what the report was saying, but would be an interesting profile. But keep an eye on it for you. Give us your thoughts on that in the comments. Now, a player that we've just mentioned there that we were obviously could have been our player had it not been for the UEFA ruling is Jean-Clair Todibo. Now, according to this came from a West Ham outlet that are apparently fairly decent, but I don't know the credibility myself, where they were kind of suggesting that maybe United might go back in the summer for Todibo. So Manchester United reportedly preparing to lodge another bid for West Ham star Jean-Clair Todibo ahead of the upcoming transfer window. According to The Athletic via Manchester World, United were linked with a move for Todibo in January, but they were unable to land him because he was on loan at the London Stadium. It's understood that West Ham could have signed Todibo for the £35 million transfer fee in January and immediately sold him to United for £45 million to make a £10 million profit. However, the Frenchman was not interested in parting ways with the Hammers. Now, that again came from a, apparently they're a decent source when it comes to West Ham news, but I have no idea on the kind of credibility. Essentially saying that there was a scenario whereby in January, we were maybe looking for West Ham to buy Todibo, because I think he has an obligation to buy for £35 million, and then we buy him for £45 million, so West Ham would make an immediate £10 million profit on that. And according to the report, that could be plausible again in the summer, where maybe if West Ham do take up their I think it's an obligation to buy with Todibo, and then we look to maybe buy him from West Ham as well. And let's not forget, he would be a Man United player right now had it not been for, the Europa League and the UEFA ruling that kind of, stopped us from being able to buy Todibo, along with like Branthwaite as well. Branthwaite would be a United player right now if Everton had accepted our bid for him. So that's one potentially to keep an eye on, because I don't think that would have necessarily been a Ten Hag signing as such. I think that was more of a club signing, because when we didn't get Todibo, they turned it and got De Ligt in. So give us your thoughts on that. That would be an interesting. Where would he play? Maybe the centre back is the 3, because he's quick, good on the ball. No, athletic, had a couple of injuries. I think he's missed 5 games so far this season for West Ham. Not been in the squad a couple of times though as well. But again, when a player's on loan, what do you kind of do? 25, good age as well. So not the worst. Would be obviously Premier League experience if we signed him as well. So not the worst idea. Not the worst idea. I would say that would be plausible. But do we have that sort of funds available to go and get a centre half when we've got the priority is the striker and a 10 for me? They're the kind of two. I keep thinking more and more around. After reviewing the Forest game at the weekend, I'm kind of more tipping towards like we desperately need a 10 just as much as potentially a striker, because our creativity, against certain teams with low blocks and stuff is turd. And actually getting somebody that's a little bit maybe more creative would be just as important for me as getting a goal scorer. But yeah, keep an eye on it for you. Give us your thoughts on Todibo below. Manchester United are reportedly eager to seal the transfer of Crystal Palace attacker midfielder Eze. Eze to Manchester United ticks a lot of boxes. The Eagles have supposedly set an asking price of around £50 million. And that came from Court Offside, not from one of their more kind of credible reports though. But he is a name that we have been linked with in the past. Eze, again, good kind of stats for Premier League proven, good age as well. Ticks a lot of the kind of boxes. £50 million. Whether we've got those sort of funds. I mean, it'd be cheaper than Simmons and cheaper than Cunha, but £60 million. Is he quite as good as those? Let me know in the comments. But, he ticks a lot of the kind of boxes and can play in that kind of 10 position. So I could see why it would maybe make a bit of sense, this. 32 appearances, 6 goals, 9 assists for Palace this season. Might be ready to make that kind of step up. Premier League proven as well. I do think I like the idea of us getting a few more players from the Premier League. The problem is it's just always the price, isn't it? £50 million for Eze, when potentially, the Cherky story was the other day was less than £25 million. Do you know what I mean? So the difference in terms of cost and quality can be a bit different sometimes. But, give us your thoughts on Eze in the comments. Now, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of the striker talk, I do think there's 2 tiers. One, Champions League budget, non-Champions League budget, but also I think in terms of player sales as well, we can generate a bit more money through player sales, then potentially we'll have the funds available to go maybe for a more extravagant striker. One of the players heavily linked with an exit is Garnacho, who does represent pure homegrown profit. So Dean Jones was saying that if Manchester United win the Europa League, they are expected to step up their interest in Victor Osimhen, and a swap deal involving Alejandro Garnacho has been mooted. United are expected to seek early clarity from Napoli regarding their interest in Garnacho, with the club still open to a sale. So according to Dean Jones, still rumours around some kind of swap deal. When it says swap, it's not a direct swap. Napoli would buy Garnacho and then we would buy. It would be 2 separate transactions, but 2 players would go would swap teams between us and Napoli effectively. Swap deals don't happen. Doesn't benefit us from a PSR perspective neither as well. No smoke without fire regarding Garnacho. I do think Osimhen is a genuine kind of target as well, but again, it all boils down to funds, availability, wages, all that kind of thing as well, which is obviously still a little bit up in the air at the moment. But give us your thoughts on that in the comments below. And then we'll finally go through the other stories. So Yapstam gave some comments regarding Luke Shaw's future, saying that clubs must look forward with players they can trust to be available week in, week out. Shaw has great ability, but is injured too often. That's saying it lightly. Managers have to make tough choices when building a squad that can handle intense football. I don't want to be disrespectful, but United may need to plan for a future without him. And I would agree. I do think... so like Luke Shaw, great player when he's available, just never available anymore. And it's a shame on his kind of career that it might tailor out this way at United, because when he is on form and playing, very, very good player. But he's just never playing for us at the moment. But the problem with Shaw, we gave him a big contract, and who's buying Luke Shaw? Who out there in their right mind would pay money for Luke Shaw? So I can see him being at United until his contract runs out, because we did give him a lucrative contract, and his injury record is terrible. But I agree with Stam. I do think if we could move Luke Shaw on, I think we should move Luke Shaw on, but it's a massive should or a massive kind of question mark around that deal. And then if you remember back to January, this was really interesting quotes that I wanted to just bring you at the end regarding Man United recruiting a Olympic running specialist to help with the like the running and fitness and stuff like that. Apparently it wasn't Amorim, it was done by the club. They brought him in as like a consultant for a few months. And he's given some quotes around what's kind of been going on, because his kind of 3-month, I think, consultancy role is now ended. We had the following to say regarding Amorim. So he said, Amorim is a great teacher. I've been in training and it's something I'm an expert on. In my last day, I went to see Ruben and I said, I hope they give you 2 or 3 years. You've got I hope they give you the 2 or 3 years you've got in your contract, because you're going to make a difference. They need to sign more players, that's for sure, but this guy really knows how to teach. I said the same thing to Jim Ratcliffe. He's a good coach, and and once they learn, I think United will do well. So that's come from the kind of expert that we got in order to do all the kind of running and fitness and stuff like that as well, which is interesting to say that he's been around coaches a lot, and really kind of high praise I felt on Ruben Amorim around him being a good teacher and a good coach. But obviously he also did say in there that he obviously needs the players, and I would agree with that. He also said on his time at United, I've been watching, and I think they're doing some really good things, but in sports, sometimes the little things can make a big difference. One day I was watching Mason Mount. He's a great lad, and the work he was doing was really good, but he was doing zigzag runs between the cones, and I could see his arm movement wasn't correct. So I went over and asked the coach if I could give Mason a couple of things, and showed him that the correct arm action should be in the sprint and on the very next run, which was maybe over 30 seconds. He was amazing. He went over the last cone with a big smile on his face, looked at me and said, this is really working. So I thought that was kind of quite interesting insight in regarding to what's been kind of going on and around his sort of role at United as well, effectively. I mean, don't make Mason Mount sprint too hard. He might get injured. That was my kind of first concern with that one as well. Don't make him kind of train too hard, because he'll be out for months again as well. But interesting, because he's an Olympic kind of coach that's helped people win gold medals and stuff like that as well, effectively, like I said, back in Amorim, but also saying that he's been helping to kind of make little tweaks, and that's the kind of, that I thought that was really kind of interesting anyway. But give us your thoughts in the comments below. Give us your thoughts on all the other topics discussed in today's video. That's you all up to date with the latest Manchester United news and transfer news. Smash a like on the video on your way out. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. See you in the next one.